Success. What on earth does it mean for Michigan State football next fall? And also, yes, this current Michigan State basketball team. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans. It's your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe. Comment below how you would define success for Michigan State football this fall, and also, well, yes, your basketball Spartans this winter, guys, because we're going to talk about that with Fox Sports producer Sean Merriman. But before we get into any of that, Sean, what do you have to say for yourself over there in Los Angeles? You were at both games.
Yes.
I think Izzo name dropped you personally and said, this Sean guy is the reason we lost. So go on, explain yourself, do it.
I went on Saturday, and that was ugly. And that said, all right, I'm going back Tuesday. I need to change up everything. I need to change up my no more Magic Johnson Script State jersey. We're going strictly hoodie. No more Michigan State shoes. We're going to wear something more generic. And my severe OCD and good luck charms didn't do the trick, clearly.
Well, let's see if they're anywhere near you for the NCAA tournament coming up. We'll just ship you a third outfit. Home Field Apparel will hook you up somehow. We're actually going to stray away from basketball for this first segment. Guys, don't worry. We will get there in segments 2 and 3, but we're going to start things with football because we've gotten this question or some iteration of this question. I've also thought, and I'm sure you guys have thought it out there. What does it mean? Even though we're 8-ish months away from the season kicking off, what would it mean for this season to be successful? How do we define that? Really quick, we did a few shows on it before Jonathan Smith even kicked off his first season. Here we said, hey, a good trajectory, make a bowl game your first season. That didn't necessarily go great. And then in year 2, hey, let's win 8 games. I think that's a good step forward. In the second year, we expect like a slow-ish build on our way to a college football playoff eventually, hopefully under Jonathan Smith. But just because they didn't accomplish year 1, I'm not going to set back year 2. I still think it's 8 wins. And it's not easy, of course. I mean, this team hasn't made a bowl game in 3 years. Last year, obviously stumbled to the finish line. So right now I'm leaning confident in the Western game, Youngstown game, Boston College, UCLA, Maryland at the end of the year. But, I'm a little on the Michigan game at home, the Penn State game at home. And then, you got road games at Minnesota, at USC, at Nebraska, Indiana, Iowa. Well, none of those teams are going to be national title contenders. It's hard to win road games in the conference, especially, Michigan State isn't a national contender themselves either. So I still think it's 8 wins. It's lofty. It might be irrational, but what say you, Sean? Am I getting a little ahead of my skis? Do I need to slow down under this Jonathan Smith rebuild, or what would success be for you on paper for the football Spartans?
I think the interesting thing there is, I'm in the same boat as you. When you asked me that question initially when we were doing this show, my natural instinct is to look at the schedule and go by game to game and pick out, right? Yeah. This should be a win. This is going to be a tough game. But keep in mind that as we're talking right now in early February, we're predicting this and we're kind of figuring out what might be a win, what not might be a win on a roster that will likely look totally different from what we're
right.
That's right. So we're almost, and the same can be said for other schools, right? I mean, you talk about Nebraska or a road game in Iowa, so many teams in this era of college football at this point, until spring football breaks and until that second window opens, we don't know what they're going to look like. So we're basically basing this off of, I think, brand name and recency bias history, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. God, yeah.
Yeah, are the two things that kind of come to mind. So in that sense, while the natural instinct is to look through the schedule, it's kind of a challenging exercise, to be honest. So rather than put it in wins, I'll put it in the sense of I just want to see improvements in areas that I would define as weaknesses this past season. I think when you're talking on the offensive side of the football, obviously there are 2 very pressing areas, which is turnovers and offensive line play. Like those are, if anyone's going to argue against those two, like you clearly weren't watching this team, I would say.
Correct.
So yeah, they got to figure out a way to limit turnovers and hold on the ball better. And I think like, you started 19-year-old quarterback last year that hadn't had any career starts under his belt. Like now that he's got a season under his belt, he's got a full off season with the coaching staff. Like I think naturally those things should correct itself. The offensive line, while you look on paper at this class and say like, this transfer class doesn't really like give me a massive boost of confidence, I will say the one thing that has impressed me is the attention to addressing the offensive line. Like they got good players in there, and they're not just good players, they're experienced players. I think that entering last season, when you looked at that line and you were like, okay, this looks like it could be an okay line. Well, the key with offensive line, as you know, is depth. You have to build depth. And I think that Jonathan Smith and his staff like approach this early transfer class with a heavy focus on building that depth. You're going to get guys like, Christian Dooley Phillips and Gavin Brocious and a lot of guys that were hurt last year coming back. And then you're getting some good transfers. Obviously, you got the Connor Moore kid who they're going to rely on. And they got a guy from Wake Forest that I think is going to be a good player for them. So they've addressed that position. I think that's going to help. And for me, like I said, like success is measuring, can you look at that unit and say, okay, like we filled the holes that we needed to do. We utilized the transfer portal for what it's meant to do, which is essentially like fill holes on your roster, right? And depth was a huge concern for this team. So if they can improve in that area, limit the turnovers, win games that they're supposed to win, and, steal one or two of those games, like Iowa on the road, I don't know. They got a transfer quarterback who obviously comes from a lower level, but he's one of the top transfer quarterbacks in the nation. That'll be interesting to see what's them. They lose Caleb Johnson, who was a phenomenal player for them. That defense will always be solid. But and then you talked about some games that you look at the schedule and say, like, even not knowing what the rosters are going to be like, having a good enough idea, that those should be wins. Those first three games, they should win those games. I think that Maryland game was a home game. Like they should win that game. Like there are games that, there are games that this program, even in year two, just from a pure like talent standpoint and what of the guys that will be there, should win. And then, like I said, can you steal a game or two on the road that maybe is a 2.5 or a 3.5 point line, and you swing that the other way. 8 wins. I think that when you made that, it made a lot of sense. It's hard for me to say that 8 wins is success when I don't know who the guys that they're going to trot out there is in this day and age.
Sure. It's valid. It's very valid.
Yeah. Somewhere, I think that like bottom line, if you're going to look at wins and losses for what's considered success, like bottom line floor has to be making a bowl game.
That's certain. Oh God, I'd be the saddest boy in all of Metro Detroit if they found a way to not make a bowl game for a 4th straight year. But I like that. It's kind of like, holding to something that Jonathan Smith said. It's not just, hey, talking heads like myself, but the man that runs the program said as much last year. It's like, don't define us, with X, Y, and Z. Define us by how we produce and grow throughout the season.
Yes.
Kind of saw that stall out at the end of the year. So, okay, well, year 2, we'll give you a mulligan. Sure, why not? Year 1, we can make excuses for you all up and down. Year 2, especially with the haul that you've got on the offense, you got some receiver help, you got some offensive line help. Aiden Childs is no longer that young spring chicken of a 19-year-old. Like, no, this is an experienced kid now. Like, now there really are no excuses to not see growth here throughout next season. So maybe just throwing 8 wins on the wall is just a little too, I don't want to say lazy, but maybe just a little too, there's too much gray area with that. Whereas, it's just improvement is what we have to see. We'll see what the wins net out at the end of the year because, just like you said, Sean, just like we know by now, who's going to be the Indiana this year? The team that starts off 10-0. Who's going to be the Florida State this year who comes in top 15? And oh my God, they're actually not even better than any high school teams around them. It's fascinating in this day and age of college football, but well said. Like improvement above anything. More to come with our guy Sean, but first need to talk your ears off about Gametime. That's right, looking for tickets for your next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or, of course, a sporting event. Finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here is why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options across all sorts of different sites. Like, they truly give you the best options at Gametime Picks. The seat view feature is also a game changer. Before I even hit buy, you can see exactly what your seat is going to look like in the venue. It is so reassuring knowing, what it's going to look like when you get in the building. And the best part, you are covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they will refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Can I throw in one more thing too? And tis the season. It's the second signing day right now. Michigan State, they signed some solid players. Hopefully they'll get another one next Monday. We'll see. If you want more info on that, the end of yesterday's show. Recruiting needs to take a step forward, I think. And I'll just do a lot of what I said yesterday, what we've said a lot of over the winter. Yes, there are going to be some diamonds in the rough in this year's 2025 class that's ranked somewhere in the 40s, the high 40s. But let's, be straight shooters here. Not a sustainable way of building a winning college football program. I get it. Mark D'Antonio made some hay with some good 3 stars. It's also kind of what derailed things at the end, because it is very hard to year in, year out pray that you could just develop 3 stars to a level that you can get to double-digit wins and now in the college football playoffs. So we need to see recruiting get a little better here. I know it probably goes away from the question because we're talking on-field stuff, but man, pit me as one of the people that are a little concerned about like the trajectory of recruiting. Are you in the same boat, or where do you pit recruiting in all this?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, recruiting is one of those things that for as many horrible memories as we have from the Mel Tucker era, and they were horrible.
Not great. No.
Yeah. I will say, like, one of the things that I think he trained as Michigan State fans who do invest time in recruiting, that he kind of trained our mind to do was like focus more on that. And we were, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like it felt like we were maybe star hunting a little here and there, but like, yeah. And there were so many times where you would see him on the field with the cars and the dogs and all that thing. And you're getting these high 4-star, some 5-star kids on campus. And while they didn't necessarily land, a ton of those kids, they did get a few. And I think that just one of Mel's strengths was like as a forward-facing kind of media figure. And he wasn't shy away from showing off all those, fancy recruits and those fancy things. And Jonathan Smith just operates in the total different end of the spectrum. And it does train your mind a bit to like think back to the early D'Antonio days. And what was of importance there. Now I will say, while these classes, like numbers wise, were comparable, the way that they were constructed seemed to be very different early on. D'Antonio's philosophy, which anyone who went to school kind of around the time that we did know that those kids that didn't get the Ohio State offers, that felt slighted by not getting them, came here and just absolutely balled out. And it was the DeDicos Allens of the world's, like, those guys were, if you went to school in like the mid 2010, 11, like those guys were just the chef's
dynamite.
State football. Yeah. And you don't see that as much with these classes. I think it takes time to make inroads in state. I think landing like Derek Simmons from a school like Frankenmuth, like that kid, and that, landing a kid like that who's the only top 24/7 kid in this class, is a big get and something that you can build on. The East Lansing running back, getting him to, end up committing there after everyone thought he was going to end up at Alabama is obviously a big deal. And then, otherwise, like, I think Jonathan Smith has a larger footprint, and part of that is where he has relationships within the high school ranks. Obviously, he came from the Pacific Northwest. He still has ties there. You saw it with kids that he landed like late in last year's class, like a Rustin Young, like going to Hawaii to pick kids. Like Mark Antonio was never going to get a 4-star offensive tackle from Hawaii. Like, so he does have that ability. And I think that those type of things and making inroads in state recruiting is going to be big. Michigan's an interesting state to figure out when it comes to recruiting. Like some years
it's up and down, right?
Yeah,
it is a yo-yo of sorts, right?
Some years you have like, you can get 10 or 12 kids that you're like, oh my gosh, I would take this kid on a dime. And other years you're like, there's maybe 3 kids in the class and Michigan has 2 of them. And if you can land the 3rd, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that continuing to build those relationships in other Midwest areas will be big for him. Whether it's Ohio or whether it's like in Indiana or Illinois, those states do produce good talent. I think that keeping, even though he didn't keep a ton of guys from that initial staff, whether it's a Courtney Hawkins or whatever it might be, like those guys have those relationships. And I think it'll be, he'll rely on that and whatever his recruiting strategy ends up being, it's almost like I would say Michigan State fans have to train their minds a little bit to continue to wash away the way Mel Tucker did it and get back to the early D'Antonio ways and understand that, like, if you were when we hired Jonathan Smith, I think the number one thing that I heard, like when it comes to like, what is this guy's biggest accolades? What does he do best? It's like player development. And again, total opposite of Mel Tucker. So
you think so? Yeah.
Yeah.
a little bit.
Right. So to get a guy like that, it's almost like you have to train your brain to rely on someone to develop these 3-star guys. And that's what D'Antonio is great on. Like you said, the diamonds in the rough, the Kirk Cousins, the Le'Veon Bells, the guys that only had, MAC offers coming out of high school. Yep. It's a little too early to probably judge him on that. But because we're used to getting those shiny objects the past couple of years with Mel Tucker and getting them on campus and getting the, high 4-stars, I just think it's a matter of giving it time.
So let's switch to basketball here because, same question. What is success for this team? Obviously, hey, you know what, before the trip, the answer might still be the same, but it's much more obvious that, well, it's got to be the Big Ten regular season banner, the first time in a while under Tom Izzo. But and that's actually something that we've said early on in the season. I remember doing the episode with Carter Elliott of Sleepers Media, but I said, hey, look, success for this team is going to be raising a banner, whether it's the Big Ten title, the Big Ten tournament title you could talk me into, or, of course, the Final Four banner. I also said, too, that I don't expect this to happen. I think Michigan State's going to have too many question marks. They're going to have another season where they're going to finish 5th, 6th, 7th in the Big Ten, take another high seed in the tournament, and I'm glad so far, despite this 2-game losing streak they're on, looking to be wrong right there. I'm very happy to be wrong about that. But I got to say, like, it looks a lot more clear that I think success is a banner, Sean. Like, it's got to be the Big Ten title. It has to be a Final Four. It's got to be one of those two things, or otherwise, I don't know if you could deem it a success, or you can go this route. Have you already seen enough movement forward under Tom Izzo in this resurgence at the spry age of 70 where you say, okay, well, looks like Michigan State basketball is back. I can see a path forward, not just this year, but next year, the one after. Is that enough for you to say that, hey, this is a successful season, even if they don't get a banner? Which route do you want to take? Are you banner or bust, or are you saying, no, I've seen the resurgence, good enough for me right now? The big game, yes, it is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw one yard to win. 1 yard to win, guys. Pair that with more correct picks and you are cashing out. Like, for example, I'm liking more than on the Travis Kelce receiving yards. I'm also liking, oddly enough, less than Patrick Mahomes passing yards too. And, I'm kind of teeter-tottering if we're going to play his rushing yards at all. But, hey, you know what? I've got some time. Again, the big game Sunday. But, hey, you know what, guys? Check it out on the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners. Big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split in $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege, for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game.
At this point, heading into this past weekend, like you said, like the lead that they had in the standings, I think it almost like the story naturally wrote itself that it has to be Big Ten title or bust. Now I texted you after the game last night and I was saying like the things that we were worried about, that we feared if they got in a close game late on the road, absolutely revealed themselves.
Yes, that was the thesis of the entire post-game show yesterday. So that was the realization that, the haters could be a little somewhat barely correct here, and maybe a little more. But sorry.
And it's like, we had a feeling that this might happen, right? Where if they get in a close game, we know the depth is phenomenal. We aren't going to say that they're matchup proof, but they sure have a lot of answers for teams that can throw different lineups at them, where they can do different things defensively, and create mismatches offensively. But if you're in a tie game late, like they were last night, or in a close game like they were Saturday, who do you go to and who do you put the ball in their hands? And I hear like, I read a lot of Michigan State. I follow everyone that covers the beat, and one of my favorite, Graham Couch, does a phenomenal job, and he says all the time, he's like, you need a dude on your team, and I'm not sure if this team has a dude. And what that means is, when you're in a tough position, whether it's a tie ball game late or whether a team is on a 8-0 run and you need to stop the bleeding, like, do you just have that guy that you can give the ball to and know he can give you a bucket? I think that in past years, like, we did have that or something close to it with Tyson Walker. But there were a lot of gaping holes that kind of negated that. This year, they have the depth. They have capable big men for the first time in a very long time. They have a point guard that clearly runs the team the way Tom Izzo wants a Michigan State team to be run. But what you don't have is that dude that can create his own shot late in games. And I think a lot of people want Jaden Akins to be that guy. I think a lot of people are hoping Jaden Akins could be that guy. He's clearly going through something right now. He stuffed the stat sheet last night, I guess, in the scoring column. He got off to that hot start, but
he did.
But Jaden Akins is not. He'll even admit to you, like, he is not playing the way that he anticipated to play right now. And it makes you think back to how many guys have we had over the years since we started becoming Michigan State basketball fans that had the chance to go pro, could have maybe been drafted, but chose to come back for their senior year and just gosh, I hope he doesn't fall into that. And I think that he does enough defensively that I understand why it's hard to take him off the court at times. And if there is one guy that is going to create his shot when the shot clock gets down, maybe he's that guy. He might be, but he's really going through something. And if this team has the chance to do what this question centered around, which was reaching their ceiling, whether that's a Big Ten title, whether that's a, Final Four, they will not get there with Jaden Akins playing the way he is right now. It's just that simple.
And we were just so close to having the post-game show being full of smiles, happiness, and we were going to center it around oh my, the Jaden Akins resurgence. Yes, you went through a little lull, but everyone relax.
Yeah.
Because he did go into that game 15 of 46 in his last 4 games going into the UCLA game, just 4 of 17 from 3, and he on the box score, he did fine enough, but I need more than a missed layup in the final minute that turned into a UCLA 3, and then Look, it was a tough shot that he had at the very end. You don't expect every game-winning three to go in, but I would like it to be closer to going in than being an air ball. And it pretty much grazed the front of the iron. So that's what we started yesterday's show with for anyone that missed it. It was just, we got one answer of, hey, who's the guy for Michigan State? Do you need a guy, or can you just rely on depth? Well, there's two answers to that question. The first one is, yeah, you do need a guy, because it wasn't just that game where it's been a hairy finish. Like, they also had one against Illinois, and by the grace of God, they escaped that one with a 2-point win. I remember the North Carolina game. Yes, they won in overtime. Let's also remember how they got to overtime. They completely melted down and urinated down their pant leg. But it's not Aikens.
Let's not forget Penn State, a game that they
good one. Playing the hits. So, yeah, and then the second answer to that question of, hey, who's the guy? Sean, it's no one. It's no one. So that's scary because we're kind of close to the finish line here. So
yeah, I mean, and here's the other thing. I think that so much is made of kind of like the lineups that Izzo goes with at times, and especially in crunch time. And you saw last night the lineup that they finished with, which is completely different from what they started with. Which they do often, but
sure.
I think having someone like a Frankie Fiddler in the game late, like the value of having a guy like that in late isn't because you're going to go to Frankie Fiddler and let him play like ISO and hit a winning three. Like his strength is getting to the line, and I think that coming out of the timeout that Izzo took last night in the tie game, I was like, okay. My guess is that he's going to draw a play for someone to go to the hole and get contact and get to the line. And naturally, like, I thought Fiddler would be that guy. And as we saw, like, that's not at all kind of what transpired there.
Not quite. No.
There are enough players on this team that have really good strengths that I think that, like, they just need to play more to. Like, Fiddler's strength is getting to the line and drawing contact. They're big men. Like Jackson Kohler, while he didn't finish late last night, he's also a guy that's quite frankly going through something, I think. He's a big man that if he can start finding a rhythm with his shot and hit 2 threes a game, he's going to be a matchup nightmare. But he goes on these cold spells where you don't see him for 20 minutes of game action. And that's tough for a team like this. So yeah, it's you're right with your assessment. I think that a lot of times with this team, depth is such an asset, but depth can only take you so far, and that's going to. I mean, when is that more prominent than come March?
Yeah, of course, when you have close games, right?
Yeah, exactly. like. I think that everyone who has watched this team would say that this team is certainly good enough to get out of the first weekend. But I also think that, like, the way that this team's constructed, you aren't going to see them run away with a lot of games and blow out a lot of teams. Like, that's not how it's going to happen with this team. I think you're going to see a lot of close games, and they need to figure out when they get in those close games a game plan of who they can go to.
Well, stay tuned to find out who it's going to be. I mean, I hope it's not any of these next 2 games. We are projected to win these games by high single digits, low double digits. But hey, if there's anything we know about Michigan State basketball, it's that any game can get hairy in the month of February. Sean, cannot thank you enough for talking success for football, for basketball. You are forgiven by at least me for bringing Michigan State 2 losses over in your home state over there. But hey, thanks a lot for your time, your insight, man. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. Always great to be on with you.
You got it. All right, guys. We'll be back tomorrow. You already know it. Right here, Locked on Spartans, your team in green and white. Take care of yourselves. Love you all. Go green.